Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our subscriber town hall, our first subscriber town hall of 2018. I'm your host, content manager for global video production, Jared Huckabee, and with us on today's subscriber town hall is a panel of technology experts for Star Citizen. Basically, we're going to talk about all the technology that we're developing for Star Citizen, that we have developed for Star Citizen, that we're continuing to develop for Star Citizen, that will make the game everything that we want it to be. Immediately to my right is a man that probably needs no introduction, but we're going to do it anyway, because there's always somebody new in every one of these. Who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
Oh, I got really confused there, like stage right or your right or...
He's on your left.
I'm on your left. But
Film right?
Okay, has anybody ever looked at me and said, that guy knows the difference between left and right? No. Nobody ever looks at me and says, he knows what's left and
the
right.
military, they always used to say, you're civilian right. Like, oh, what?
No, that's fair.
Yes, Sean Tracy, for those that don't know me, I'm the technical director of content. So actually, yes, we develop technology as well, but really with me today is some guys from my team that are, we all call ourselves tech artists or technical animators that work in the layer between the artists and the engineers. So they do a little bit of both is kind of the point, but it's an important piece of any feature that you have a tech artist working on there, because whether it's working on tools to make the process better, whether it's to make performance a little bit better, generally you're going to want to have a tech artist involved. And definitely on like a character side, it's really, really heavy on the tech art work, as well as the ships too. But yeah, so that's me and
Right.
you guys.
And to your not right?
Am I not right?
Is that Gaige?
No,
Oh,
see,
you're looking
no,
at
see, not right.
Because
See,
you're not on my right.
right would be that. See? We all know what the difference
On my
between right
own
and left.
center, my name is Stephan, computer graphics supervisor, and I basically do anything that Sean Tracy needs that's extremely art heavy, that Chris really wants done.
Yeah. Yep. And usually if we want to get something that we know Chris is going to like right away, we put Forrest on that. Because Forrest has worked with him for so long, and you know, whether it was they were always sharing tastes and that was the thing, or he's just gotten really good at understanding some of the things that Chris was looking for within captures, cinematics.
In some ways, you're a lot on that side of the building. You're a lot like I am on this side of the building. It's just whenever something's needed and there's not somebody specifically, in that role. It's like, well, they can probably do it. It's like that. So you tend to make much better looking things than I do, though.
Well, arguable.
I don't know. I look like this. He looks like that. All right.
Sorry.
And now to my actual right.
Real right. Gaige Hallman, tech artist. I work under Sean, specializing mostly in characters, character tech, all the back end for item setup, things like that. Yeah.
And I know you've been part of the project since the beginning. When did you come on, Sean? I mean, you were there.
That's quite a story.
Yeah, you were part of things.
Yes. Well, it was funny actually. Somebody sent an email to my old Crytek address, and they're like, "Why didn't you get my email?" And I'm like, "Oh, you probably had the old Crytek address that's still in the thing." So yeah, when the engine was initially licensed and evaluated, I was involved with Chris and Forrest and a group of outsourcers, of course, that were all connected to it, and then eventually ended up ended up leaving Crytek and then coming over to CIG when I was in Austin, and then
That's right, you started in
moved here.
Austin.
Yeah, but that was about 3 years ago when I made the transition.
Oh, wow, yeah. All right, and then you, of course, came on board with the Next Great Starship competition, right?
Always a fun story, yeah. Yep.
We were
That's
going to make
funny.
that ship?
So on that-
We were going to make that ship?
Oh, you mean the dropship that we made?
Yeah. All right. So if this is your first subscribers town hall, it's a roundtable question and answer format. Basically, we're going to take your questions live from the chat. Because this is the subscribers town hall, questions come exclusively from Star Citizen's development subscribers. That means you do have to be a subscriber to submit your questions, and the way we filter that out is with Spectrum. Now, Spectrum is our custom communications platform available on robertspaceindustries.com. You can go to robertspaceindustries.com, click on the Spectrum link. It's in the upper right-hand corner on the newly redefined website. And check your mic, Sean.
Oh.
Is it muted? Yep, it is muted. Your mic is muted.
Oh no, the best conversation.
What is mine on?
Nope, here it says. He just flipped a switch. Try that now, Mike.
Flip a switch.
Sorry.
Or, yes, I did.
Sabotage.
And Click on Spectrum and then go to the subscribers chat. The subscribers chat up on Spectrum are exclusively where we're taking questions from today. We also have a thread up in the subscribers den, which is the forum section of our subscribers of Spectrum, where we have been collecting questions all week. So we have been collecting questions from there, and we'll just use those to get us started here. The first question from there says, so in the last year, you built a lot of the foundational tools, such as Subsumption UI, Solid, etc. Can we assume that we now have them all in a working state? Are tools done? Are we done making tools?
Totally.
for
Yep. Done. Everybody's happy with the tools. They never need any more work. We never have to rework them. It's perfect on the first delivery. So, next question.
Tools go through stages.
Yeah, of
right.
course.
You initially implement the tool,
real snarky.
and you do it as a way that it works. Right. It can get the task done, and then once it's in there, you have to reevaluate a little bit and say, does this get the task done as quickly as we would like? Is the user the way that you interact with the tool as friendly as we like, because usually when it first gets implemented, our tools are very complicated, which means using the tools is very complicated, and you want to simplify it as much as possible because that limits mistakes and also speeds up your workflow. So usually it goes through a couple passes. So I think probably the answer to that question is while they're implemented and somewhat working, they still need a lot of work, and tools take, we use software that we're on
never
version 11, 14,
Sure.
like all these Adobe, Autodesk, all these programs are never quite finished, right? Because they could always be better. So.
And maybe, to use a term from Eric, to pontificate on the minutia a little bit, to kind of get into this.
does use that word a
Is there's a lot of, and I hate to overcomplicate this, but there's a lot of layers and a lot of tools that are involved. And I mean, you can call, a script that somebody writes for an artist within 3ds Max, that's a tool. So you could call the Sandbox editor that we use a tool. You could call our copy build patcher setup a tool. So there's a lot of different sort of layers of these tools, and one of the things that we're working on even this month is kind of structuring those tools teams a little more accurately to be fit for the purpose that we need them to be set up for. So a good example is we have a general tools team within the UK that's led by Martin Senior. And general tools are pretty much defined as anything that's outside of the editor. Then we have a Sandbox tools team that's led by Sasha Hova in the Frankfurt, and that's all the tools that happen within our editor kind of interface.
Like Planet.
Like Planet Editor, like Track View, like a lot of other things people have seen on various ATVs. Then we have another layer of this, and that's the art and animation tools. So these are tools that we write on top of those DCC apps, so 3ds Max, Maya, Motion Builder, and that's what a tech artist really usually spends a lot of his time on, is that sort of tool structure. So what we're always trying to do is make either an environment artist's workflow faster, better, things are less prone to bugs or anything like this, trying to automate it. Then the same thing goes for the animation tools, and so everybody's aware, we've got a pretty big, we call them the technical animation team, but we've got a pretty big team, and that's led by Rob Howes out of Derby. So now I've just talked about 3 different studios completely, and you can imagine that there's a lot of communication back and forth. There's a lot of really early morning meetings to kind of discuss this kind of stuff. So that gives you an idea of what that team looks like. Now, where are we at in terms of tools? So just like you've seen with a lot of the gameplay systems, as that gameplay system comes online, you need to then either at the same time or shortly thereafter develop the tools related to said feature so you can implement and do the feature. So we put a huge onus and a big priority in the last year, 2 years, Forrest and I specifically focused on this, on the content creation tools that we had, because we knew when we were talking 2 years ago that the scale of this game is so immense that the amount of content we need to generate is to a degree that those tools need to be very powerful for the artist, because again, we can't just do it in a standard AAA kind of setting where you make one character very specific. That is your hero character. Okay, cool. We're going to make 12 more of those, and that's it. We're talking thousands of character assets already created, and a character asset is like a shirt or a pant or whatever. Then you've got the same. Then you've got the same complexity, if not more, on the environment side. Then you've got more complexity within the ships. So we've got all those tools in shape. We've got our pipelines. We can do all this. Now, where's our bottlenecks? Where is all the time going? Because the only thing that a tech artist will think about after that pipeline works is how can I make that better? And every day, that's all we're thinking about is how can we make that better for the developers? How can we make that easier for the developers? But because we put such a huge focus on the content creation tools, I say this all the time, our ability to create content has far exceeded our ability to implement said content.
That's true.
And it's not a good thing necessarily, because what it can do is, okay, so we develop a lot of content, and like again, the players aren't seeing a lot of the Squadron 42 kind of content yet, and that stuff has progressed very well, but because we've made so much stuff, it kind of sits there unused for, a month, 2 months, 3 months. And then what happens, and this is the really, really rough part, is a system will change under the hood. And it might change in a feature team in the UK, so I had no idea about it, Gaige had no idea about it, Forrest might not have known about it. And we're getting way better in terms of that communication structure. But what happens is, and I call it asset rot. So basically, a thing is sat there for so long that it starts to rot. Basically, there's bugs that get created after the fact, and that's just based on underlying changes. So kind of the focus is moving towards let's make sure that our tools for implementation and for all the designers match our rate and our ability to create this particular content.
And what you're talking about here is a struggle that happens
Daily.
and not just for us. I mean, this is a standard game development thing.
Not even game development. I think this happens, across anything that uses digital
software
assets in some way.
Some team will go faster than another team, and
Sure.
you're always doing that struggle of okay, this team is now this efficient. Now we need to make this team this efficient, and then of course these guys need to come up and stuff like that.
And it's this
Always.
interdependency thing, and yeah, like the times that people get real angry is when they've made a super nice asset. Like James Koo will finish off just gorgeous character, and it'll sit there for about a month, and then he'll come back to it, or what's worse is somebody else grabs it. Puts it in game and it says, oh, what is this? There's errors on it or whatever. James said, okay, I'm going to send this over to James, and then he gets some sort of email that says, oh, why is this? You said you were done this thing. It's all good. So it can create some friction. So we've really, really got to address that on a tools and developer workflow side. And this is a nonstop thing. We're never going to be done the tools, and we have to be okay with that. But that also means that we have to very specifically prioritize certain things, and we prioritize it based on what the bottleneck is globally. So what is slowing this thing down? Is it slowed down at this step, at this step, at this step? Why do we have 30 assets sitting here and 1 asset sitting here? So I'm very much pontificating on the ninja. But I do want to go a little bit further, because the tools thing is a real big focus for me personally anyways right now. Away from features, so much more on the tools. So we used to have a very, very solid mentality with what was CryEngine is now Lumberyard, and Lumberyard has maintained this mentality of what you see is what you get. So this is a designer is working within a level, he does a thing, let's use this, sorry, I'm gonna use your Red Bull cup for an example. So he places this cup on the table, cool, great. Now he wants to actually test this and see how that actually worked out. Now, if he has to go through a whole bunch of, I've got to launch this app, I've got to set this CVAR, I've got to do this thing, I've got to get 20 minutes through the level, and then I can see my cup placement. He is going to place it one time and never again. And even if it's not perfect, so it's like, actually I wanted that cup on that paper. So if I wanted to make that little move here and then go through 20 minutes, I'm just not going to do that. So what we're trying to improve is the what you see is what you get mentality. And sometimes that can be totally opposite of what would make sense for a system. So sometimes what makes sense for a system is that you're not updating everything in real time. You're gonna bake it, basically. You're gonna save it, you're gonna export it, you're gonna somehow lock it in. But the mentality of what you see with what you get is never be locked in, always be changeable. So there's a mentality that has to be addressed there. And I think some tools that we've developed in the past, we have to not really rework the tool, but think of a different workflow for said tool. So a good example is subsumption, and something we've been looking at is these GUIDs with object containers, and this is just a method of us identifying certain object containers, and then subsumption uses a list of all of these things. The problem is for a designer, if he makes a new object container, he can't go manually go add this thing to the list, wait for a build to generate, and then see his new thing. Like that's the exact opposite of the what you see is what you get functionality. So that's a big drive on the tools front, and yeah, that's about it. I think I cover the show, right?
So the short answer is no. We're not done with tools.
No, absolutely not. And we'll get better.
Now, to follow up on that, for us recently, we released our feature trailer for Alpha 3.0.
Yes.
And you were a big part of that. And the work on that feature trailer has now led to you working on another tool.
Yes.
Because of that. So tell us how that went.
Well, originally we spent some time in getting some footage together for Chris, and by we, I mean there's we had QA was capturing, we had some developers in-house capturing, and then it came back, and then Chris asked me to take a pass at it, look at it, review it, and then kind of revise it with some additional footage. But
now, I'm sorry, just when you say capture footage, just so everybody knows, we're doing it the same way you guys do it. We load the game up, we open up OBS, when we record using the same engine, the same game client, our players are using.
What in the past, right? The way the rendering worked a lot for the cutscenes, like in our original fundraiser trailer, and then a lot of our commercials, so to speak, was we have a way to render out, where we can set everything up in the editor, and then we run the game through the editor, which was the ultimate. What you see is what you get from from our engine. And then it would render that out into a video format, which we would then upload to YouTube, and then people would see. But we would do everything by hand. Let's say if I wanted to have a ship fly past, I would have to make a quick particle effect that I would attach to the thruster, and then I would have to, in the software, I'd have to say, okay, at this moment in time, I need to keyframe a boost to the thruster so it flares out, and and everything was very manually done, like you were doing like a movie type thing. And then our tools got more and more complex. Ships' landing gear started retracting, automatically, and the tools started surpassing our cinematic methods. And it became very difficult to start doing these types of, trailers and cutscenes and to show off the current art and everything. And it really came down to, wait a minute, we were just showing off the art, but now we need to start showing off the gameplay mechanics along with the art. And so these cutscenes kind of had evolved from just showing off art to showing off the game, right? Because everything's as important as the art. So this was one of the first times that the goal was very clear: capture in the game, right? That was the goal. That Chris was very clear. He wants in-game captures, right? So we started getting the footage back and stuff, and a lot of the footage was fairly rough right off the bat, and it was very clear very early why it was very rough, and that was because we have a very rudimentary tool. Spectator cam, director cam, whatever you want to call it. So I was like, okay, well, let me give this thing a try. So, I give it a try, I use it. It is.
Let's talk about the shortcuts of it.
It's rough, I'm like, how do I move the camera?
It's crazy.
Like, hold F4, and then you gotta
put your elbow in there.
You gotta use literally. You gotta put your elbow on a key to make sure you move it up and down, and then you need to put your thumb on the right joystick to rotate the camera. And, the whole thing was just this very thing. So I grew a third arm for a week and a half. and I randomly would have people come over and I say, I need you to hold this while I do this. And then, some of the shots, I'm like, okay, well, I don't like the shot because it doesn't have camera movement, or I don't like the shot because it doesn't use any rule of thirds, or it doesn't do all these, all these things, right? All with great potential, just not quite what Chris is used to on the cinematic front.
And all because it was very important for us to make the trailer in the game client, on the game server, the same game servers the players playing, using the same tools the players have access to.
That's right.
Hoskaha and Thrustmaster and Alex S189 and all you guys out there. We wanted to do this. We wanted to do it the same way you guys were doing it.
So we went in the trailer, and the trailer that you saw in 3.0 was the live product. A lot of people have, how did you get those frame rates and stuff? A lot of times I did log in when there wasn't as many people on the server, right? Because they're making heavy server optimizations right now in regards to, the fact that when you play and there's lots of people in the game, the network code is doing lots of things and handling lots of things at once. And so they're making sufficient changes to saying, okay, if this character is on the planet, maybe not update the skeleton, right? And stuff like that. So there's it's a very known thing right now that is just part of game development and part of having an MMO that is now being targeted. However, there was the challenge of, how am I going to get these frame rates? So I would log in at 2 o'clock in the morning and I would say, hey guys, who wants to play with me? And I would kind of almost go undercover and I would record my experiences with players. And I would be like, and this is how I got them to play with me. I'd be like, hey, does anyone want to join me? And they'd be like, yeah, what ships do you have? I have all of them. Yeah, sure. All right.
He spawns a Bengal or whatever.
Yeah, so and I would play with people, and also I'd get QA in house to have Star Marine matches with me, and I essentially just learned their tool set. I did the best that I could, and I just played the game, and I captured my experience playing the game.
So now that we have the trailer.
It was like, oh, see, and Chris is like, see, you can do this, of course. And I'm like, well, you can, but it's not, I think I made it look a little easier than it really is, because it is difficult, and it was a challenge, right? But part of my job is to just give him what I want to get it approved and make it look easy doing it, right? So he was excited about it and said, I would like this to be revamped. I want this director's cam. I love the director's cam. We all know Chris has a background in film. He understands it. He loves it. And so we want to be able to bring this beautiful universe in a cinematic mode, not just in Squadron 42, but also in the MMO PU, because who doesn't want to capture their experience, because people are going to be making almost these types of movies. And what is it called when we were younger, when you would make these things, machinima?
Machinima.
Yeah, and that was so fun back in the day, and the people are probably still doing that. I'm just older now, so I probably, but when I was a kid, I always loved doing that, and so I kind of went back to my childhood and thought about what would be cool as if I can do this with this. So we decided we're going to make a tool. Right, and we decided we're going to take the current director's cam, spectator's cam that everyone has access to currently. If you hold F4, rub your stomach in your head, and hit the keypad at the same time.
Right? Freaking crazy.
Then we're going to build upon it. And step one, I think, is to just capture something and to have an interface. Right. So okay. Who's currently doing this now, right? Because I do believe that you don't just build a wheel from scratch. You have to look at what your competitors are doing, and then you have to see what they're doing well, what they're doing not so well, and then you basically evolve into a better, and it's not stealing, but you make it, you evolve, and you always have to keep up with modern technology, right? That's just the way that it goes. You have to know what people around you are doing, because you have to make it that good, and you have to make it even better, because now you're also doing it, right?
You have to know what the expectations are.
Yeah, so I asked Sean and some people, specifically Sean, I said, hey, who else is doing this? Who's the best? And he goes, Mario Odyssey.
And I'd been playing a lot of Mario Odyssey with my son, with my kids, and on my own at 3 a.m. getting power moons, but they do have a.
Do you save up all the power moons so that when you turn them in, you get a?
It goes like I saved up like all my gold coins, and then I bought like a gazillion of them just so I could.
It seems more rewarding when you save them up.
It's super
and do them
rewarding.
all.
But on that point, the barrier to entry for Mario Odyssey is there's no barrier there to snapshot mode, and that's a nice tool that it's a player facing tool, and that's what Forrest is looking at here. So yeah, Mario Odyssey and it was funny to use that as a reference, especially sending it to Chris, where I'm like, I'd never expected in my life to be sending Chris Roberts a screenshot of Mario with snapshot mode on, and there's there he is with Cappy just hanging out in Cappy Land. Or
How did that go over? You sent Chris Roberts a screenshot of Super Mario.
you know what? He was like, no, that looks awesome. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. So that's where we have to go, as well as NVIDIA Ansel was the other side of this. So, and the whole goal to this player-facing tool is to remove that barrier to entry and give them the same power that Ansel or like a Mario snapshot mode, or even in Zelda, you've got a bit of a picture mode that you can deal with. Making it as accessible as those are, I think is a very, very worthy endeavor.
All right, now I want to jump straight into this. Another question for the subscriber. I want to talk about the character customization. We just released our public roadmap, and people have seen that character customization is slated for the 3.1. Right now, you talked a bit earlier about how sometimes you have a thing going, and it's done at the development side, but implementation side is still waiting undo this. I think the character customizer probably falls as a pretty good example.
Yeah, and that one, of course, the expectations of the customizer right out of the gate are pretty direct, and if you look again to go to Forrest's point about looking at what everybody else is doing, is a really important part of this, and you look at games like Black Desert Online, or you look at games like Destiny, then everybody approaches them a little bit differently. And as we wanted to do this, just very much out of the gate, we just want some form of customization. Just select a head, select some hair, select some eyes, and set the colors.
For the first part.
When you say we just want call that a day. But even at that let's say limited sort of customization experience, you can still make mistakes on the way there, and some mistakes would be an interface that isn't as intuitive as you would like, even for that kind of thing, as well as making sure that whatever system is developed is a totally scalable thing. And as I talked about a little bit before, because of all the different studios, excuse me, and different levels of communication from various teams, it can happen that a thing will be developed and it's not exactly what Chris was expecting, or Todd was expecting, or I was expecting. So basically, it's gone to a full feature team now, which is it's a cross-discipline team of programmers, and UI engineers, and artists, and everybody kind of all together working on that. So they're progressing pretty nicely on it. But what's interesting is Gaige had already done the entirety of the asset setup months ago, and this was even when I had done an ATV or a reverse, or I had done a show a little while ago.
We do a lot of shows.
Yes, a little while ago, and we had talked about that coming out very soon, and it was definitely a goal for 3.0, but we didn't. It wasn't where we wanted it, and not again because the actual assets and things weren't ready. It was more the interface just wasn't where we're demanding the interface has to be for doing that. So, but yeah, Gaige was absolutely back in. I think it was October or November.
It's been a while,
Late summer.
Really went through them all.
Talk, Gaige.
I should speak.
Speak onto this.
I don't even care what
Actually,
it's
it's
about.
interesting about the customizer too, because we've always had our own version within the office called the Loda Editor.
That's a good point.
But it's just not something that you'd want to give to people because it's not a very friendly interface at all. So the hardest part was making it a nice interface for the user while also accompanying scalability for the massive amount of assets that we have. Because we have that on our end, but it's very difficult, and we often build onto it constantly. So just dishing that out wouldn't be great early on. Like I said, didn't want to rush it. But an interesting part about that is, like, it kind of comes in a few stages. We always have our first step of character artists. They make everything on their end in models. Then we have our implementation phase, which we've been doing in the back end for a long time now. And then there's the UI phase.
UI is always there at the end, huh?
Yeah, and it's one of those things, because it's the visual element, it's something that is very picked on. So it goes through a lot of stages.
Obviously, this first version of the character customizer that we're intending to come with 3.1 won't be the final version. It's what will it have versus what we've talked about that it won't have in this first version.
It just won't be sculpting. That's the thing.
It won't have the DNA, the DNA.
DNA, because and We could
eventually
absolutely
will.
give you
The
yes.
first version. We're talking about the first version.
Yes. And I've talked about it before, but there's complexities because of the rig logic and because of things like we want to drive the face with faceware, we'd like animations shared, and then even further, we want to be able to update the runtime rig code implementation, DNA, as it's called, at runtime and be able to save this for your given character. So there's a lot of reasons why it's not just as simple as putting a couple blend shapes in and going between them, because we could absolutely do this, but it's actually not going to get us to where we want to go with this system. So you're going to have head selection, you're going to have hair selection, and you're going to have eye selection. These are good colors between the hair and eyes. And I mean, we're even beaten to death some things like, oh, okay, you know, the workflow right now is that we're going to have images for each of the hair, but is that really the scalable way to go? Shouldn't we do a render to texture sort of thing of the hair asset? And then, oh wait, you know, hair assets don't render super well in a render to texture kind of setting. So how do we set that up? There's minutia in here that has to be addressed. So that's why it's getting addressed on the feature team. But yeah, again, to go to Gaige, he's already set up all these assets like this because we had to support this for Squadron 42. Yeah. We had to support this for the PU and for all the designers because we've got that design-facing tool, a loadout editor, because that's how they make all the NPCs and these kind of guys. But yeah.
Yeah, so technically we've had customization for at least 2 years now, just in different phases.
Yeah, right.
What's cool about the phases too is like with our backend setup and our internal loadout editor, we have all these dynamic tag setups so that when you switch ahead, it'll switch the body color and it'll find all the appropriate items to fit this character. That's why we can have all these, modular setups as they all kind of dynamically switch to each other and kind of piece it together on how we set it up internally.
Right, like one of the interesting challenges, even for Squadron, but this we can talk about how we solved it for the PU as well. But in Squadron, for example, all the heads, they've got different size necks. And I think in an ATV, we're going to talk about how we actually scaled that Tagaka. Yeah. He's one of the cool characters within Squadron 42.
Like 6 feet tall or something.
Yeah,
or
well, 6'6" or something like this, really big.
Save it for the ATV.
Oh, yes. Well, they've already talked about it anyway. I lost my train of thought. Where we're going with that was the necks were actually different sizes between the heads. And this totally makes sense, right? Because yes, a human is just different proportions, these kind of things. But the problem is when you have a modular system and a shirt, the shirt doesn't
just stretch.
It just doesn't move for it, and then you can't use the same shirt across a bunch of different guys. So that's why we came up with this tag system so that the tier 1 and tier 0, really high-end actors get kind of custom clothes that fit them specifically. So, and this is going to be the case for, actually, I'm not even sure we've talked about this character, so I probably shouldn't. It's a very specific character. Nope, I can't. Won't do it. Nope. Nope.
But whoever they are, they dynamically
But whoever
switch.
they are, they're custom. But how we solved this in the PU was actually we unified the neck shapes right down, and it was just, there was a range of verts that we actually unified anyway.
It was a long-standing discussion too, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big decision to start unifying things because you start to lose some character when you unify or standardize anything. That's the big the trouble we've had with clothing too. Like you can't standardize so much that everything looks the same. So of course, did we want to standardize skulls and head shapes and necks, and how similar would everyone start to look
put
after
the ears
that?
in the same position.
Yeah.
There's so much.
So they started
detail.
testing, Vineet in the UK, he did some tests to figure out how far can we blend before we start to lose the character of this person. And then once we finally decided, we made that the new standard, and then all clothing up to that point on the neck would then fit the same size, and then they can do whatever they want up here.
I mean, we literally just walk behind his desk and Gaige would be like, does this look weird? And then you kind of like, if it jumped at you, like, this is now a different character, then we've gone too far, right? Because you got to shape the skull, because you got a hat you got to put on, and the hat. And some people just have giant heads.
Helmets. You got
They don't think about it,
sunglasses,
man.
you got-
Hats stretch to fit people's heads. You can't just shove the same thing on there. It doesn't work.
I have to special order my hats from Amazon, I know.
Can't be in our game, I'm sorry.
They don't fit in my
And
head.
I mean, to talk a tiny bit more about it is there's a lot of logic in each of these items. Like he said, the head carries logic with it because there's components on that gameplay entity class of the head, of that given head, that triggers a bunch of other things on the body. So that's where the complexity comes in. And again, sometimes I get jealous of other games because there's this, it's a difficult thing to have a system that does everything. You usually can make a system and make some concessions based on your gameplay design. If you're making an MMO, you're going to make different concessions than if you're making a single player scripted
Yes, you are.
experience. So now you see my problem, because we need a system that one has to coexist. So they coexist together, and two has to do everything. So
We do try to do everything
yes, we do.
on everything.
Yeah.
We try to do everything on everything.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, it's the whole reason we funded the project in this way. It's the reason we operate the way we do. It's so that we don't have anybody telling us what we can and can't do. It's only,
Except Chris.
wait, I was speaking as Chris.
Oh, I see.
I was speaking the royal we.
Okay.
All
The
right.
royal we.
So I'll do what I do with Chris. I'll argue once, I'll argue twice, and then there I go.
All right. So the very first iteration of character customization, our intention is to put that out with 3.1. You'll see heads, you'll see eyes, you'll see, what was the third one? Hair. And then of course, throughout the rest of the year and beyond, we will continue to iterate and add features, and eventually to the point where we get to the DNA system and everything.
Yep.
It's like anything else with Star Citizen. It's an iterative
Yep.
development. This is a good time to mention. See a lot of questions coming in about recent comments as far as the insurance system and pirated ships and spawning and whatnot. This is a good time to say that we're going to have more information on that on Friday's Reverse the Verse. So you're going to want to tune into that. We have Todd Pappy and Brian Chambers, who are our guests on Reverse the Verse Friday, and we're going to talk all about our future plans for piracy and stuff like that. But I can tell you now that the comments that you saw on Spectrum are very much speaking in the same regard. Will Maiden was speaking about current implementations of insurance and how stolen ships work in 3.0 and 3.1 and 3.2, but not the long-term design of the system. There have not been any changes to the long-term design that we're aware of at this point, and we will ask Todd Pappy to clarify that on Friday. So just putting that to bed right now, since this seemed like a good time, that whole thing with the piracy and the insurance. He's talking about how it is in 3.0 and 3.1, and it's the same. It's a follow-up to the conversation we had on another subscribers town hall back in November, where we perhaps made it a little more clear then that we were talking about 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, and not the long-term design. So, hope that helps everybody.
Well
That's a
said.
good segue.
All right.
Well
So, and
said.
tune in Friday to find out an update on what the future plans are and what we're thinking about and where we're going.
That was the best non-answer answer I've ever heard.
I've been
If
doing
heard
this
one.
for a while.
I'm just teasing.
I've
you.
been doing this for a while.
That was fantastic.
That's why they put
yes.
me in it.
Yes, and Todd will clarify all.
Yes. So, pass the buck to Todd. All right. So,
It's true. I totally just said.
so back to the questions from the live chat here. Chris talked about on last week's R2. I don't know if you're going to know, but I'm going to go ahead and ask you that the Hull C was having retraction problems due to the animated physics grid. Do you know anything about what we're doing with that? It's currently on hold. It's currently on hold while those people have been moved over to do other work. So I don't know that we actually have an answer for that at the moment because
No,
work
we don't
hasn't
have
been
this.
picked up yet.
Yeah, we haven't come up with a solution yet. But it's not because there isn't one. It's because we're not working on it.
You're not working on it?
That's kind of it.
Yep.
And yeah, like a lot of this is sitting in Frankfurt on the physics engineers for the physics system itself, because yes, the issue, there's a couple different issues with the whole thing. But one of them is, yes, animated physics, like the thing needs to change. And that's, again, this goes into those, what you see is what you get kind of functionality stuff. But this system that we currently use, that is being re-engineered anyways, is a pretty static system. So you make it, that's it. That's what the physics grid is. It ain't changing, regardless of how that chip breaks up or whatever. We can turn it on and off, but we can't move it around. And actually, there's kind of a fundamental thing within the engine and within Lumberyard, that there's a concept of areas versus entities, and an area is not an entity, and thus you can't do the same stuff with an area volume that you could do with an entity just from the code side. So
Everybody knows that.
Another example of an area, physics grid is one. Another example would be a viz area, or these things that we battle with viz areas and portals. So this is what calls out certain regions or areas. And the difficulty that comes sometimes with those is, those don't animate either. So anytime we want to really change that ship around, even in destruction, it absolutely comes up. And then some other problems with the Hull C is just, I think somebody had done a quick sort of setup with it was like 50 Hornets or something attached to it. And I don't think this is what you're going to be able to do by any stretch of it. But just to give you an idea of the performance implications that brings, the fact that a ship can be strapped with that much stuff is a performance concern on the GPU, not so much on the CPU, but GPU, and that's where we get worried about it. So there'll be some things we need to solve there, but none of them are insurmountable, as nothing is. It's just a matter of time and money.
And that's why one of the things I'm quoted as saying most often is, this is game development, not game construction. We are finding the answers. We are discovering the answers in game development. Construction, you've got the blueprints. You've got everything's been figured out. You know, and you hire workers and they come on. Everything's there in the blueprints.
Yeah.
The engineering is there. Everything's there, and it's just following instructions.
Right.
They're complex instructions, but they're instructions nonetheless. Game development is the process of, try this. Okay, that doesn't work. Try this. That doesn't work. Try this. That doesn't work.
Did you just call us master builders?
Maybe
I think
him.
you did.
Ooh, maybe him.
I'm just teasing.
We're the only
It's
two
good.
people in the company with content in our title, so
That's true.
we don't know what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Let's follow that up. So,
I've got plenty of content.
We talked a little bit about what Forrest is working on now with the director tools and everything. What are you guys working on now?
I sort of talked about it a little bit with the tool structures and the mentality moving around backlogs, and if you really want to get into the details of it, it's right now. I was joking with Forrest about it, but I'm spending a lot of my time in Outlook at this exact moment, which is not obviously where I want to be, but
The director part is
where it needs to be. Yeah, no, and absolutely, and I can't complain about that at all. But I of course miss having the editor open and actually solving some problems directly. But you've got to have a bit of this production work to get everything going. So yeah, just working with the various tools teams on getting them prioritized for the year, and making sure that we're supporting all those feature teams.
What are you working on, Gaige?
On my end, really just tools development for the character side in Maya. This is a lot of working with Red 9 and the UK team. Rob Howe's over in the UK, communicating with them. We're building tools here that will then sync with their tools, implement their health tests, and this will just help streamline our whole character process. So we can distribute these to the character team themselves. They can create their models and everything, run health tests, make sure it's all good to go. It'll automatically hand off to us, and we can run our pipe very smoothly once this is finished, and then into implementation. And hopefully, like we said before, implementation can be the hardest part, smoothing out this whole process and just delivering it in one go. Yeah.
All right, next question for subscribers. Hey, Sean, we haven't heard about Faceware in a while. What's going on with that?
It's coming along. It's coming along good.
Next question.
Well, I know, I'm always trying to shut it down. I shut it down and then I make it take 20 minutes. So yeah, Faceware, we took it super far. Already in, was it Gamescom we first showed it, I think. Then we had a setup at CitizenCon showing it running. In real time. There's some performance stuff that we want to address, and especially in the state that we are right now, I don't think anybody would accept me dropping Faceware as a feature to sap any performance right now. Nobody is wanting to make. I assume most of the players would not want us to drop that in if it had any adverse effect on the performance. So we're trying to completely address that out of the gate. And just so everyone's aware, there wasn't a massive team working on the Faceware implementation. It was really down to just 2 or 3 people. and is Graham Phillipson over in the UK, as well as some of our QA staff and a bit of design. So we've got the feature online. It's in the game. It's not in the PU as it ships. It's all shut down and turned off. But we're ready to go. There's a couple things left. A good front end for the players, basically, because we have a lot of tools that are just sitting there in console variables with different tweaks and these kind of things. So with the new mentality of our team structures internally and these cross-discipline teams, the FOIP as a feature will go to one of these cross-discipline teams. Now, most of the, I would say, heavy lifting is done. So the only things that they really have to do is to wrap an interface around it. So whether that's a spectrum overlay or whether that's an options menu within there so that you can tune different things. I really wanted to put it in the character creator because I think that'll be a really exciting thing to be able to drive your character as you sculpt and customize.
That'd be surreal.
But I don't think the versions are going to line up in terms of when that one comes out. So they'll have to get an interface on it, a bunch of different options. Design will need to take a look at it just to see, again, how does this interface with I forget what we're calling it, but when we do a video comm to a player, when you call each other, how that whole party sort of structure works out. So it as a feature is ready, but like we said, it's kind of suffering in the same way of asset rot, where this is a bit of a, and it's not rotting as a feature necessarily, but it's not getting, it's not gotten much further progress in terms of its implementation. But the feature itself is still getting work on it, so Graham is still making changes to the way that it actually works. But yeah, it should be coming along shortly, and I'm not even sure if it's on the roadmap, but it will appear.
It's not currently.
Once that team is 100%.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not currently on the roadmap right now because, like I said, a lot of the folks that are necessary to implement it into the game have other tasks ahead of it. So it's at this point we can't accurately predict whether what quarter it would be in. So we're holding off on that because we are just like the whole C. Like people knew that we were working on the whole C. We've been showing the whole C in ATV for a while, but it wasn't on the roadmap, and it's because it's got a pin in it right now. It's all right. We've got it to this point. Now we have an implementation issue that we need to work with. We don't know those. We can use those guys on other things that are more valuable to the Precision Universe right now. Because honestly, if we could put the whole C in the Precision Universe in 3.1, what would it really do? At this point, you still need to be able to offload and load up cargo to it. I mean, the other game systems that are necessary for it to really function in the PU still haven't come online yet. Sure. So it's one of those things you can stick a pin in it and put people on more pressing things, and that's what the implementation on the Faceware is. You need those guys to do that, but they're on other things right now.
And I would argue that in the past we've driven out features in that way where it really wasn't as ready as I would consider. And yes, we're an alpha, totally understood, but I don't think any and I know the community defends us all the time. So, yeah, it's an alpha, but we're not. What's the best word for it? Well, I guess judged as an alpha. We're judged as a live, released, fully commercial product. So with that mentality in mind, we got a little more careful of how we release these features. So it's cool that we get the features out to you guys. And I've talked about this before, the layer between the developer and the community is so thin at CIG that it is so close that you could work on something a week away from a player actually experiencing it, and that's scary for a developer. That's super scary because usually we're offline for years at a time, working with our own feature, using it, doing things with it, finding issues with it, and then when it goes out, you're pretty sure that things are going to be okay. But again, our layer is just so thin here that it can be.
Our layer is about 24 hours.
It can be. It can be. I've done a thing, and then 24 hours later, it's absolutely in your hands.
Recently, actually, a couple items we were working on, and it was like, tomorrow this is in.
Yeah, well, and actually, I had seen something online, so I'll address it anyways a little bit, because the Monocle showed up in the patch notes.
Yeah.
Right, and now. Is that the biggest feature? Hell no. I mean, is it super important? Not incredibly, but we had worked on this thing 6 months ago, right? And it hadn't yet gotten its way in because we knew for sure the concierge were going to have this. So we saw that rolling out, and we're like, what happened here? That just hadn't gotten all the way through the implementation portion. So it was like a 10-minute job. I mean, really. So a couple clicks, and there it is. It's ready to go. So we make sure that got in. Now, I fully did not expect to see that in the patch notes, that it was just added, but that's how those things happen. Though.
Yep.
But there's the Monocle.
Well, the Monocle, it's not in 3.0, where it's
3.0.
301 is what we're shooting for right now. Which is a good time to mention that, yes, we pushed a 301 patch to Evocati for testing last night. So you might have heard a word of that
Was
around
that confidential, and I just blah that?
It's all right. It's all right.
Fail. I read it on Reddit.
Yeah. I know.
If it's on Reddit, I feel
That's where
like
we get
it's
all of
okay.
our news.
Sorry. But no, yes, we are working on a 301 patch. It does have some minor bug fixes. It is not the 3.1 patch. That's our big quarterly release with all of our optimization work. The 3.1 patch is primarily designed to address things like the golf ball, the ping pong ball, whatever ball you see. It's like a Rorschach test. Like, which ball do you see when this happens? Some people see a ping pong ball, and some people see a golf ball.
Can I explain that one? Why you see that? Because you're there. The skeleton is there, and that's actually a representation of the skeleton. And and remember about 2 years ago, I'm like, man, I really just want to put a wire representation of the skeleton so that when this happens, I know actually what the bullets are doing. And I'm kind of glad we didn't do it, because I never expected players would ever see it, maybe in the case of a bug, but I'm pretty glad we don't have these wire dudes running around right now. The little ball, I guess, is a safer thing. But that's that's your origin.
Yeah. So right now it's being tested on Evocati, and they have a pretty solid fix because it was a UI issue that was causing it. But now the fix has caused a UI issue in typical gameplay. The fix for one bug has now created a new bug, so they're working on that. So there's no ETA for when the patch will actually make it to live, of course, when we think it's ready. But it is currently in testing now. And that wraps up the show, guys.
That's it, a whole hour?
Yeah, just about.
Really? Already?
Wow,
Cool.
I talk a lot.
It's all right. That's why we have you on.
No, I know. I just feel bad.
That's why we have you on. So is there anything else you want to say? You want to leave the Star City
For the
community?
ping pong ball, I want to suggest an Easter egg, maybe Chris Roberts' face on the ball. I don't know.
Whoa.
Or actually make it.
You can suggest
Or my
that.
face
We're
on it.
going to sit over here, and you just tell us how that suggestion
There's
goes.
not a lot of times I just fully am right behind Jared on something. This time, 100%.
Like I do a lot of things to mess with Chris Roberts. I'll play with his teleprompter and stuff, and
How is this worse?
No. It's like I mess with Chris Roberts more than anybody in the office. But no, you want to. That's all you.
Well, we have a scanned head now.
Let's
so-
redact it over. Let's not go that far.
Oh yeah. I should tell everybody.
Or is that top
We have a scan version of your head too.
No, I don't think it's top secret. It's in Squadron somewhere.
Oh.
So I look forward to people trying to find it.
Yeah, that's the ultimate Easter egg.
This took a weird direction.
Yeah, this took super weird.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes I hook up his face to VoIP, and then I tell myself how good of a so, Sean, you're doing great.
It's true, I didn't do it.
Cool. That's awesome.
All right, everybody. So that about wraps up our subscribers town hall for January. Be sure to come right back here in 2 days. On Friday. Friday we have Reverse the Verse. It's at a very special UK-friendly time of 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, it's always a fun one.
So you can see the difference between Disco doing a monologue at 12 o'clock in the afternoon and at 8. It's, hey everybody, welcome to Reverse the Verse. But Brian Chambers and Todd Pappy will be on. They'll be following up tomorrow's Around the Verse, which is our big Frankfurt studio update. All kinds of cool stuff there. And of course, we'll follow up with Todd on the current thinking for piracy gameplay and everything. So so tune in for that. That's it. So for Subscribers Town Hall, thank you. I'm Jared. That's Sean. That's
Thank you,
Forrest.
subscribers. Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
It's
Gaige.
Ga-
Thank you,
Gaige.
Sean.
I talk sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see you
just
next
there
time,
looking
everybody.
Awesome.
Let's just stop it now.